battle raged on as Alex crouched behind a crumbling stone wall, his heart pounding in his chest. Smoke filled the air, making it difficult to breathe, while the sounds of blaster fire and explosions echoed across the battlefield. It was a war unlike any other, a war that spanned the stars and threatened to tear the galaxy apart. But in the midst of it all, Alex had one clear mission: eliminate the alien queen. Elora. The alien queen was the leader of the Xantari, a ruthless race of warriors that had waged war against humanity for years. She was the heart of their rebellion, the reason their enemies were so powerful and organized. It was said that if she fell, the entire Xantari Empire would crumble. She was dangerous, intelligent, and merciless. But Alex knew his orders. He had been trained for this moment. To follow the chain of command, to obey, to strike down the enemy. But when Alex looked across the war-torn landscape, the sight of Elora, standing alone in the center of it all, gave him pause. She wasn't just any alien queen. Her presence was otherworldly, like an ancient force of nature, something deep, something powerful. As she stood among the ruins of her empire, the destruction around her seemed almost fitting. She was a creature born of war, but now, in her moment of defeat, she stood tall, unbowed. Alex's mind raced as he watched her. She was heavily guarded by a group of elite soldiers, their weapons pointed at the ground as if waiting for a signal. They hadn't noticed him yet, but he could see it, the hesitation in her eyes. Was it fear? Was it sorrow? Or was it something else entirely? For a brief moment, Alex considered his options. His team was waiting for him to make the shot, to take her out before she could escape. This was the mission: eliminate the queen, no questions asked. If he did this, the war could end. It would be over. Humanity would win. But as he steadied, his rifle, the weight of his decision, hit him. Was this the right thing to do? He had trained for years, prepared for this very moment, but now he found himself questioning everything. He had always believed in his duty, in following orders without hesitation. But this was different. This wasn't just about winning a war. This was about a life. Her life. In the heat of the moment, Alex found himself remembering a conversation he had with his mentor, General Hayes, back at the base, back at the ER. "You must always remember, Alex," Hayes had said, his voice low and serious. "The price of victory is sacrifice. And sometimes the greatest sacrifice is the one you make when you save a life, even when it seems like the wrong choice." Was saving the alien queen the right choice? Was he willing to sacrifice everything for her? His mission, his career, and even his comrades? Alex's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden movement. Elora stepped forward, her eyes scanning the battlefield as if searching for something, or someone. Her gaze met Alex's for a brief moment, and time seemed to stop. There was something in her eyes. It wasn't the cold, calculating stare of an enemy. It was the look of someone who had seen too much, who had fought too long, and who had come to a crossroads. In that fleeting moment, Alex understood. She wasn't just a queen. She was a person. Just like him. Caught in the middle of a war that neither of them had chosen. He could see the pain in her face, the weariness in her stance. For the first time, Alex realized that Elora wasn't his enemy. She was a symbol of something much larger, something beyond this war. The decision before him was impossible. His mind screamed for him to take the shot, to end the threat once and for all. But his heart, his gut, told him something different. Elora had made no attempt to flee. Instead, she had stepped forward, as if daring him to make the first move. It was as if she was waiting for him to decide, waiting for him to make the choice that would change everything. Alex's fingers tightened around the rifle. The weight of his mission, the weight of the lives that depended on his actions, pressed down on him like a mountain. But there was also something else, a feeling, a sense of responsibility that he couldn't ignore. Could he really kill her? Was the cost of this victory worth the life of another being? The sound of the enemy approaching broke Alex from his thoughts. They were closing in. If he didn't act soon, they would lose their chance. The pressure mounted, and the weight of the choice seemed unbearable, but in that moment everything clicked. He knew what he had to do. With a sudden movement, Alex lowered his weapon and took a step forward. He could hear his team's voices in his earpiece, urging him to take the shot. But he didn't care. This was no longer just a mission. This was about something bigger. He would not kill her. He would save her. In one swift motion, Alex sprang from his position and ran toward Alora, pushing through the smoke and debris. His heart raced as he moved toward the alien queen, knowing that this decision would change the course of the war, and perhaps his life forever. As he reached her, Alex's voice was steady, but his mind was a whirlwind. "Come with me," he said, his words carrying a weight of finality. "I'll protect you." Elora's eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, a faint glimmer of hope appeared in her expression. The smoke still hung thick in the air, and the ground beneath. Alex's boots felt unsteady as he and Elora sprinted toward the hidden bunker. The sound of blaster fire echoed from behind, growing louder with every passing second. They had no time to waste. The escape had barely begun, and already they were being pursued by enemies who would stop at nothing to finish what had been started. "Move! Faster!" Alex shouted, glancing back to see the shimmering figures of the enemy soldiers emerging from the smoke. Their weapons were ready, their intentions clear. They wouldn't hesitate to kill him and Elora if they caught up. But Elora didn't move quite as fast as Alex expected. She was struggling to keep up, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her gaze kept flicking back toward the enemy, the weight of the decision they had just made hanging over her. "Why are we running?" she asked, her voice surprisingly calm despite the chaos surrounding them. "You saved me. Now I must ask, you. What do you want from me?" Alex didn't respond right away. He had no answer, no clear plan, no backup. All he knew was that he couldn't let her die. He couldn't let anyone die. Not like this. "Come on, we need to keep moving," Alex urged, his voice a little more desperate now. He knew if they didn't reach the bunker soon, they would be caught. And that would be the end for both of them. Elora hesitated again, her eyes locking with his for a moment. The moment seemed to stretch forever, the world around them seeming to fall away. Her eyes were like the deep space above, full of stars and secrets Alex couldn't fathom. She wasn't just an alien queen. She wasn't just a figure of war and destruction. She was something more, a symbol, a leader, and perhaps more than he had initially thought. "I don't want anything from you," Alex said finally, shaking his head. "I made a choice to save you. I don't know what happens next, but we have to survive. And for that, we need to stick together." Elora looked at him for a long time, her gaze weighing him, as if she was trying to decide whether or not to trust him. Trust. The word lingered in the air like a phantom, haunting both of them. Elora had never trusted a human before. To her, humans were the enemy, the invaders, the ones who would destroy her people if given the chance. And yet here she was, relying on one. "I have no choice but to trust you," she said quietly, her voice so soft that Alex almost didn't hear it over the roar of the battle. "But know this, human. I will never forget what you've done. You've saved my life, and for that I owe you mine." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. It was the first time she had shown any vulnerability, and Alex couldn't help but wonder if it was the first step toward something deeper, something more than just survival. As they reached the bunker, Alex slammed the door shut behind them. The thick metal panel sealed with a satisfying hiss, and for a moment the world outside faded into silence. But Alex knew they weren't safe yet. They were just getting started. Inside, the dim light flickered as they made their way down a narrow corridor. The air was cold and stale, and the walls seemed to close in on them as they walked. Alex led the way, his instincts kicking in as he navigated the bunker. But Elora's presence behind him felt different now. She wasn't just the alien queen anymore. She was his ally, whether he liked it or not. They finally reached a small control room where Alex quickly began to check the comms. There was no signal. The network was down, and their chances of getting help from their own forces seemed slim. Alex cursed under his breath. They were on their own. Elora stood at the window, staring out into the endless darkness. She looked so much like a warrior in that moment, unflinching, determined. But there was something more in her eyes now. The hardness had softened, replaced by something Alex couldn't quite place. "How long do we have?" she asked quietly, her back still to him. "Until they come for us?" Alex's fingers hovered over the console as he thought about it. "Not long. They'll be here soon," he said. "We'll have to fight our way out." Elora turned to face him, her eyes sharp now, calculating. "Fighting is not enough," she said firmly. "I know what we need." Alex looked at her, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" Elora's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I know where the Xantari keep their weapons, powerful enough to defeat an entire fleet. But it's hidden. We'll need to travel to the heart of their territory to get it." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. "You want us to go into the heart of enemy territory?" "Yes," she replied. "We don't have a choice. If we're to survive, we need that weapon." For a moment, Alex stood frozen, the weight of her words sinking in. Going into enemy territory was nothing short of suicide, but Elora's determination seemed unshakable. She was confident, and that confidence was contagious. Alex knew they couldn't stay here forever. The decision was made. Elora walked up to him, placing a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of trust, of camaraderie. "We will need each other to get through this. We fight together, or we die alone." Alex nodded, his resolve hardening. This was no longer just about survival. It was about something bigger, something that neither of them had anticipated. As the sounds of distant explosions echoed through the walls of the bunker, Alex and Elora shared a quiet understanding. The impossible journey ahead of them would test them both, but they would face it together. The unlikely alliance had begun. The silence in the bunker was suffocating. Alex could hear nothing but the soft hum of the emergency lights overhead and the distant rumbles of the battle outside. He sat hunched over the table, his eyes fixed on the map of Xantari-controlled territory that Elora had provided. His fingers traced the jagged lines of the alien borders, feeling the weight of the decision ahead of him. They had come to a point of no return. The weapon Elora spoke of was hidden deep in enemy territory, a place where no one, human or alien, dared to venture, but it was their only chance. The stakes were higher than ever before. They needed this weapon to survive, to stop the unstoppable force that was hunting them down. Elora stood by the wall, her back straight, her gaze fixed on the dark horizon outside. She had barely spoken since their arrival in the bunker. Lost, in thought. Alex knew she was preparing for what lay ahead. In her eyes there was a fire, one he had seen before in the heat of battle. But this was different. There was something personal about it now. The two of them were alone. Alone in a hostile world. Alone with no backup, no reinforcements. The path ahead was filled with unknowns, with dangers they could not anticipate. Yet Alex was certain of one thing. This alliance, this uneasy partnership, was their only hope. "We leave at dawn." Elora's voice broke the silence, her words simple but filled with resolve. She wasn't asking. She was telling him. Alex nodded, already knowing it would be futile to argue. He had no other plan, no other option. "Got it," he said, his voice low. They spent the next few hours preparing for the journey. There was no room for mistakes, no margin for error. They gathered what little gear they had left. Blasters, medpacks, and rations. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. As they prepared, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was a one-way trip. They weren't just going into enemy territory, they were walking into the heart of a war machine that would stop at nothing to destroy them. And they would be completely alone. The hours passed in a blur. By the time the first rays of dawn began to creep through the cracks in the bunker, Alex and Elora were ready. Alex slung his blaster over his shoulder and made one last check of their gear. "We can't afford to make any noise. Keep quiet. Stay close and watch each other's backs," he said. Elora gave him a sharp nod, her alien features unreadable as ever. She was a warrior, a queen, but now she was something more. She was his partner, and together they would face whatever lay ahead. The journey to the heart of the Zantari stronghold was treacherous. Every step they took felt like a step closer to their doom. The terrain was hostile, rocky, uneven, and littered with the remnants of past battles. The once pristine landscape was scarred by war, a cruel reminder of the destruction the Zantari had wrought. Alex could feel the tension in the air as they moved through the barren wasteland. He knew the enemy was watching. They always were. For the first few hours, the only sounds they heard were the crunch of their footsteps and the occasional distant rumble of explosions. But as they neared the outskirts of Zantari territory, the tension began to build. Alex's instincts were on high alert. Something was off. He could feel it in his gut. And then, as they rounded a corner, the trap was sprung. A sudden barrage of blaster fire erupted from hidden positions, and Alex barely had time to react. He dove to the ground, pulling Elora with him as the bullets whizzed past. The ground exploded in dust and debris, the air thick with the acrid scent of ionized metal. "They know we're here," Alex growled, pushing Elora behind a large rock formation for cover. "Get ready." Elora didn't hesitate. Her eyes narrowed as she drew her weapon, a sleek silver blade that hummed with energy. She was a queen, a leader of her people, and she had fought countless battles in her lifetime. But this was different. This wasn't about leading an army, it was about survival. They exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. They would fight together, or they wouldn't fight at all. There was no turning back. The first enemy soldier appeared in their line of sight, his body outlined in the orange glow of the burning wreckage around them. He was fast, but Alex was faster. He raised his blaster and fired. The soldier fell, but there were more, dozens of them, hidden in the rocks in the shadows. The Zantari had set up an ambush, and they were relentless. Elora moved with deadly precision, her blade flashing through the air. She was a whirlwind of motion, cutting through the enemy ranks with ease. But even she couldn't take them all on alone. Alex's shots rang out, hitting their targets with pinpoint accuracy. But it wasn't enough. More and more soldiers kept appearing, as if the entire Zantari army had been waiting for them. "We need to move," Alex shouted over the roar of gunfire. "They'll overwhelm us if we stay here." Elora nodded, her face set in a mask of determination. They couldn't fight forever. They had to reach the weapon, if it was still there, if it hadn't been destroyed in the chaos of the war. But as they moved through the maze of rocky outcroppings, it became clear. The Zantari were everywhere. They had anticipated Alex and Elora's move, and they weren't going to let them get any closer to their goal. Alex could feel the weight of their situation bearing down on him. Every step they took toward the weapon felt like one step closer to death, but there was no other choice. The enemy was relentless, and they had only one option now: fight or die. As the battle raged on, Alex's thoughts flashed back to the moment. He had saved Elora's life. Was this what he had signed up for? Had he made the right choice? Was saving the queen worth this struggle? The conflict builds. Can Alex and Elora survive the onslaught, or has their decision sealed their fates? The struggle for survival had only just begun. The air inside the cavern was thick with the scent of scorched metal and burnt earth. Alex's body ached with exhaustion, his muscles screaming for rest, but there was no time to stop. The Zantari forces were closing in, and the ancient weapon they had been searching for was within their reach. But as they neared the heart of the underground base, Alex could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He didn't know if they would make it out alive, and worse, he didn't know what kind of man he would be once this was all over. They had fought their way through wave after wave of Zantari soldiers, each encounter leaving them more battered and bruised. The last stretch of their journey had been the most dangerous, with traps, hidden defenses, and ambushes designed to slow them down. But they had made it this far. And now, the final test awaited. Ahead of them, deep within the cavern, stood the weapon, an enormous, alien structure that pulsed with an eerie blue light. It was unlike anything Alex had ever seen. Its massive form suspended in the center of a giant chamber, the walls covered in intricate alien symbols that seemed to glow and shift as they approached. "We're almost there," Alex said, his voice hoarse. He glanced at Elora, who had remained stoic, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Elora nodded, but her expression was unreadable. The tension between them had only grown over the course of their journey. Despite their alliance, she still didn't fully trust him. She had to be wondering, had his decision to save her been the right one? Would this weapon really end the war? Or had they just sealed their fates? As they moved closer, a low, menacing hum filled the air. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he realized they were not alone. The Zantari had anticipated this. They knew exactly where the weapon was, and they had set a trap. "I told you," Elora said, her voice tense. "This is what they've been waiting for. They knew we would come for this." Alex drew his blaster, his grip tight. "We don't have a choice now," he said. "We either get the weapon, or we die trying." The chamber was suddenly filled with the sound of heavy footsteps. Zantari, soldiers emerged from the shadows, their weapons raised. It was an ambush, the last one. They were surrounded. Elora stepped forward, her hand raised. "Stay behind me," she ordered. "I'll take care of them." Alex hesitated. He had seen her fight and he knew she was capable, but they were outnumbered. "We fight together," he said firmly. "We're not getting out of here without..." Both of us. Without another word, they sprang into action. Alex fired his blaster, taking down one of the Zantari soldiers. Elora moved with a fluid grace, her blade cutting through the air as she took down another. The two of them worked in perfect sync, a team forged in the heat of battle. But despite their best efforts, the Zantari forces kept coming. They were relentless. Elora's energy was starting to fade. She had already used her strength to fight off the previous ambushes, and now it was starting to show. Her movements were slowing, her breathing becoming labored. Alex noticed the subtle signs, the way she winced when she swung her blade, the way her grip faltered. "We need to hurry," Alex shouted. But Elora's gaze was fixed on the weapon, and he knew that the decision she was making was bigger than just survival. She knew what this weapon meant. Not just for the war, but for her people, her destiny. Then, the Zantari commander emerged from the shadows, his dark armor glinting in the dim light. He was larger than the others, his presence imposing, and he carried a weapon that seemed to hum with dark energy. "I knew you would come for this," the commander said, his voice deep and cold. "But you will never have it. It is ours, and it will destroy you." Alex tensed, his heart racing. This was it. The moment he had feared had arrived. They had come so far, but now they were cornered. Elora took a step forward, her eyes locked on the commander. "You may have the weapon," she said, her voice steady, "but you will never control me again." Without warning, Elora lunged forward, her blade flashing in the dim light. But the commander was ready. He raised his weapon, a crackling energy shield surrounding him. The blade clashed against it, sending a shockwave through the air. Elora was thrown back, her body slamming into the stone wall. "No," Alex shouted, his voice raw with panic. He ran to her side, but he knew they didn't have much time. The Zantari were closing in, and Elora was vulnerable. The commander raised his weapon, preparing to strike the final blow. But Alex wasn't going to let that happen. Without thinking, he sprinted toward the commander, his blaster raised, but the energy shield was too strong. His shots ricocheted off it, leaving him no choice but to get closer. And then, in that moment of desperation, Alex made the ultimate sacrifice. He dove toward the commander, throwing himself into the path of the weapon's blast. The world exploded, in light as the energy coursed through his body. Pain seared through him as he collided with the Zantari, knocking them both to the ground. His body, broken and burned, lay still. Elora's scream echoed through the chamber as she watched in horror. She crawled to him, her fingers trembling as she touched his face. No. No, Alex. Her voice cracked with grief, but Alex's eyes fluttered open and he smiled weakly. I couldn't let them take you, he whispered, his breath shallow. I saved you. Elora's tears fell freely as she cradled him in her arms. You saved us both, she said softly, her voice filled with awe. You saved everything. In the final moments, Alex's vision blurred, but he knew deep down that he had done the right thing. His sacrifice had given them a chance to win the war, to change the future. The weapon was theirs and the war would end. He had given everything and it had been worth it. The resolution. In the end, was it fate that brought Alex and Elora together, or was it simply the price of saving the Queen? As Elora stood, holding the weapon and gazing at the horizon, she knew that their fight had only just begun. But one thing was certain. Alex's sacrifice would be remembered, and their victory would be his legacy.